This is going to be a bit of a tongue twister, but I'll try my best. This Dell 7010, we've already done a video on, and we've already done a video on with this and the 3070 Ti, and also the GT 710. We've done several videos on that, in fact. Go back and watch those if you want to see our shenanigans that went along with that. But today, we're a little late to the party. We're going to be trying to play Starfield on the GT, see, tongue twister, on the Optiplex 7010. But we need to do a bit of an upgrade. This is what we're going to be putting the innards from the Optiplex 7010. We're going to put it in this case. This came to us from Hellcracks. We've already done a video on a Hellcracks case. It was looking like a fractal torrent, but this one is a kind of officey style PC. So this is the one we're going to be putting it in because it's just easy to access things that we need to access, putting it in this case. Now, we don't need to worry about the power supply because actually the 7010 uses standard ATX power connectors, which is great. It means we don't have to buy an adapter to convert them to the proprietary Dell type ones that some chassis do have. Luckily, we don't need to worry about that. So we will be pairing that with a Be Quiet, and this is the Pure Power 11 FM. Great power supply, very reliable, so that's what we're going to be using. Changing from this case to this case, we're going to lose some functionality or some ports on the front. This has 4 USB 2.0 ports on the front, which, believe it or not, although they're 2.0, they're actually super useful. Headphone and microphone jack we will still be able to use, I think. But I don't know if these are standard connections, and I've got a feeling they're proprietary, so we're going to have to kind of figure that one out afterwards. Now, we're only going to have 2 USB 2 on the front of this because it only has 2 on it, and then 1 USB 3, which we will not be able to use. Headphone and microphone jack will be fine as long as we can find the pinouts and rewire them if we need to. But I think that's pretty much all we're going to lose functionality wise. We're obviously going to have a lot more space to work with, which is great because we are putting the 3070 Ti back in here for our Starfield test because basically I don't have any other GPUs that will run it that well. So that's kind of why we're going with that. So before we do that, we've got to strip down the GT 710. Before we do that, we've got to strip this thing down. So let's open up the 7010 and see what we need to do. This thing wasn't actually that hard to open last time. Oh look, a GT 710. CPU cooler there. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. Well, it should just fit fine in the case that we've got. I'm not sure about the backplate either because I think this is actually on the case. I don't know if we're going to be able to put a backplate on that case, but that's fine. It will still work without that. Obviously, it's safer to have the backplate on there, but it is what it is. This is for science. And as I said, we're late to the party with Starfield, so we kind of need to get on with it. We're going to lose the CD drive because honestly, don't really need a CD drive anymore. And since I've had this, I don't think we've even used it once. So it looks like I was incorrect about the USB on the front. It looks like they are USB 3.0. We've got a standard USB 3.0 connector there, which means that I can actually plug in the USB 3 connector on the other one, the other case. But the downside is that it might mean we have less ports than what I thought we were going to get because although the connector is huge on the other case, it's only got 1 USB 3.0 port, which means that whole connector is just going to be for 1 USB 3.0. Unless there's a way I can kind of take this entire section out and make that fit into the other case, which we may do later on, but probably not in this video because that's going to take a bit longer than the time allocated for this video. Another thing I've just noticed about this case, the power connectors are obviously standard, as I said earlier, but it looks like the power connector, the button and the LEDs that go on the front are non-standard, so I will have to figure that one out a bit later on and we'll have to jump start it somehow, provided I can find out which pins actually turn this thing on. So that's the motherboard out, and I've just seen that the power switch is actually over here, so I should be able to figure out what pins are to turn the thing on. And then the audio jack is down the front there, so I'll have to figure that one out later. It's not really essential that we get front panel audio working, so we can still plug in the back there, so that's not a major issue. We don't need to worry about that, but we do need to be able to turn it on, so I'm gonna have to figure that one out when I'm building it. But first we need to upgrade the CPU. So in goes the i7-3770. Okay, so in that interlude I actually damaged the socket, some pins on the socket when I was trying to clean some thermal paste off of it. 3 pins got bent upwards on the socket, so I hope I've bent them down correctly, and this is going to be worth it. I guess if the video is live then it worked because you're watching it. So I'm just crossing everything I can in the hope this works. I really hope this works. Okay, in goes the i7-3770. This doesn't have a backplate on it. Luckily it's the standard 478 socket size, so I got one that I can mount on the back because the backplate is actually built into the chassis, the Dell 7010 chassis, so it doesn't need it. Kind of just squashes it all together when you screw it down, when you screw the cooler onto it. So I need to find one of those. Okay, so here is the backplate for the CPU, and that will just fit in there, hopefully, the correct way around, like that. And then we can screw the cooler in. It's definitely going to look a little bit weird inside the other case because it's wider than it is longer, but that's okay. We're not interested in that. We just want to play Starfield. The only thing I need to consider now is that the exhaust vent here for the CPU cooler is going to be slamming onto, I think, on this case, a fan. Because obviously we've got the fan here. I don't know if that's going to work, so we'll have to figure that one out in a minute. Of course, all this would be really simple if I could just mount a standard socket 478 cooler on there, but I don't have one. So we've got to make this work, at least just for now. I really hope this works. I think we can start putting it in the case now. That's pretty much all there is to it. I've just got to figure out the pinouts for the power button, but we can jump start that if necessary. So opening up this office orientated case, we can see that it's actually got some noise dampening pads there, which is quite nice to see for what is really a very, very extremely basic case, which is fine for what we're going to be doing with it. Nothing fancy, no hole there for the PSU shroud because we don't really care about seeing the PSU at all. USB 3.0 header there, all the standard header connections there, which we have to try and repin somehow. I'm sure we can figure that one out. And a bag of spares. And it looks like, again, they've only supplied an extra 2 motherboard standoffs. Something I did bring up with them about the other case, the Fractal Torrent lookalike case that we looked at, is that they only gave you 2 motherboard mounts when most ATX boards need 3 if you're going to screw them in there, which you will need 3. So 2 is not enough. But in this case, it is fine. Okay, this is where we find out if it fits. So what we need to do is we're going to have to take the fan out, I think, to be able to mount this in properly, as I thought the fan is going to be in the way. But that's okay because it's not going to get that hot in here. And we can probably sort out cooling in a different way. So we need to remove that fan. Okay, that's the extra standoffs put on. So we should now be able to just screw this on to the chassis like that. It's gonna look a bit weird, but I think it will play Starfield. Here we go, it's finally done. Janky as ever, but it's in the case, and I've got the 3070 in there with the fan off because I actually forgot before I started doing this that I need to take the cooler off and the fan off to be able to mount it on this board because of where the power connector is. But that's done now anyway. It's working and it's cooling the GPU down, currently at 66 degrees. And we're in Starfield and it's running. It's running really well actually. I'm really impressed with it. So we have been playing around with it a little bit. As you can see on the screen now, we are on the low preset, which is by default enabling FSR 2. So let's see what that actually looks like in game. Now we are at the viewport, and the viewport is so far known to drop FPS dramatically. And as you can see, we're getting about 40 FPS on low settings now. It doesn't look particularly amazing, if I'm honest. And everything is fuzzy as you would expect. So not a great visual gaming experience, let's put it like that. So we are going to increase that because we want to make it look better. So we're going to change that to the medium preset, and that changes pretty much everything, as you can see, to medium apart from motion blur, which I'm actually going to change to off because I do not play with motion blur. Don't know if I've mentioned that before. So this is a medium preset with no motion blur, and we're getting 35 FPS looking around. Bear in mind this is an i7 3770 4-core 8-thread CPU with the 3070 Ti, obviously, which is taking up most of the grunt work at the moment. As you can see on the side of the screen now, PresentMon Beta 0.5 is what we're using on the left of the screen here, and it's an amazing bit of amazing program, to be honest with you. It gives you all this cool information here. We've got presented FPS and we've got the 99th percentile FPS at the bottom there, so our 1% lows and our 0.1% lows, I think that's 1% lows, so we can see that 1% lows are actually 32, so not that much lower than what the average FPS is. We've got frame times and we've got GPU busy, which is the delay of the GPU to render the image and display it on the screen. It's a really cool thing actually. As you can see, they're both fairly even. If we move around here, you might see those change a little bit. There's not much going on in this area of the screen, but maybe that'll change once you get into a battle and stuff like that. You've got GPU frequency there, and then GPU voltage, GPU temperature, which is 68 degrees at the minute because it's quite cool now. And we've got GPU memory use. Interestingly, this game actually is not even using, well, it's actually just using over half of the GPU RAM, 4.96 gig in total, which is, it's not too bad, but we are running at 1080p. The monitor we've got here is only 1080p, so that's the resolution we're running at. We think that's probably the resolution that most people will run this at on a PC, unless they've got a higher end PC or a decent monitor, but I think 1080p is still the most popular. So we are going to increase the graphics one more time, well actually probably more than one more time, up to high. Oh, that's the wrong one. We'll change that back to, no, not ultra. I think that's probably asking a bit too much for this. So we're going to change that to high. And you can see there the render scale's gone up slightly to 62%. So that is the resolution at which the game is actually being rendered. And then of course FSR is upscaling that to 1080p. So let's see what that looks like. So there we go. It's about 37, looking at this huge structure in the middle there, dropping down to, I think I saw it go down to about 30 before a minute ago. But it looks a lot better. Not as smooth as obviously it should be, and it needs to be really for intense combat games, but as we're just walking around, it's not much of an issue. Oh, apparently running is not a good thing in this game. Who'd have thought? Why can you not run? I guess it makes you out of breath, right? Yeah. So about 30 to 37 FPS in high settings at 1080p. And let's increase that because, you know, science. So we're going to go to ultra, and let's make sure we disable motion blur because I do not play with motion blur. So we are set to ultra now, and this is probably going to be really bad. We're hovering around the same frame rate. I think what's happening here, I've just noticed a setting when I was in there a minute ago, is something called dynamic resolution. Now what I think's happening is that to maintain a stable frame rate, the game has a setting called dynamic resolution, which is changing the rendered resolution dynamically, hence the name dynamic resolution. So I think if we turn that off and we set the resolution to 50%, so 50% of 1080p is
540p.
It's on the screen now. It's a very low resolution. You really wouldn't want to play with that, so I can't imagine this is going to look amazing, to be honest with you. We're still getting around the same frame rate, 35 to 37. It doesn't look, yeah, it definitely doesn't look that great, so dropping that down is not a good thing. Okay, so we've turned dynamic resolution off, as I just said, and we've changed the render resolution scale to 1080p, so effectively it's nulling out FSR. I don't really know how that works, so I guess FSR is not on. How can you upscale the default resolution, the render resolution, to the resolution you're actually displaying? Comment down below if you know how that works. I don't. Anyway, we're going to go down to, say, about 90% of the 1080p resolution that we are displaying at. So let's try that. Oh. Okay, our frame rate is pretty much staying the same on Ultra. Don't forget, this is Ultra. We're on Ultra. That looks pretty good. The lines are really nice and sharp. The building is not fuzzy in the distance. The trees look pretty good. Although when you go up to them, they're not that great, but from a distance, they look quite good. There are some things in this game that do need a lot of work, but it's looking pretty good. Anyway, let's see what some actual gameplay is like. Okay, so let's see what the FPS is like in space. I'd imagine actually it should be quite good, unless there's a lot of other ships around, but we'll see what it's like. Okay, so here we are. Amazingly looks like Earth, but it is not Earth. We gained about 5 FPS maybe, I reckon, by going into space. Okay, so it looks like we're going to Sol System, which, for those of you that don't know, is where Earth is.
so sad.
It's dead.
Rest in peace, bro.
Let's have a look, see what dead Earth is like.
Oh my god, you can see the individual dust particles on Saturn V.
That's what it actually looks like.
Hmm.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Shoot.
Okay, so we have arrived. Okay, so we have arrived at Earth. And in this game, Earth looks like it's dead. We also have no shield, by the way.
Yeah, it's fine. I've done that on purpose. Oh my god.
The whole planet is desert.
This is the after effects of climate change.
Don't forget, this is 300 and something year.
But yeah,
Yeah.
very good at grammar, aren't you? 23, 30 something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like you're saying yeah, but wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, so we're now on the planet Earth, or what's left of the planet Earth in this game. It looks like basically desert wasteland. Let's go around and have a look. Okay, out we go. Welcome to Earth. On the bright side, we're getting 60 FPS.
Bro, you can't just pull that out, bro.
Okay, so we're gonna make one more trip back to Mars just to see how Mars looks in this game and see what kind of FPS we get. Of course, every planet is going to be different. It'll perform differently, but let's just see what our local planets look like. Okay, here we are on Mars. We've landed on Mars and it pretty much looks the same as Earth is right now. Okay, so we have now disabled FSR. So this is purely 1080p resolution, no upscaling, anything. Not gonna lie, it looks pretty cool. So we're going to take off and then land again at a place called Cydonia, because apparently that's where we need to go. Okay, here we are at Cydonia on Mars. Okay, as we go into this building, don't forget we are on high settings and FSR is disabled, so this is pure, raw 1080p gameplay. So we're getting about 45 FPS, average FPS in this area here, with our 99% down to about 37. So that's around 10 FPS difference there. So the dips are quite noticeable. Now, one thing to bear in mind, that I did actually install this game on a normal spinning drive. For the love of God, please do not install it on a spinning drive. They just cannot read fast enough. As soon as I moved this over to an SSD, I had no drops, no loading issues, no freezes, nothing. It's all gone. So it is definitely better to put it on an SSD. Preferably a good one, but if you can't, then any SSD is going to be better than none compared to a normal spinning hard drive. So if you're thinking about doing that, please don't. One quick look at our settings here that we're using for this part. So we are currently on full screen borderless, custom preset because we've tweaked a couple of settings. We've got shadow quality set to medium, indirect lighting high, reflections high, particle quality high. And I can't see this one because it's behind the thing there. I can't read what it says, but that's set to high. Crowd density is high. Motion blur, we always put to turn to off because we don't play with motion blur. GTAO quality is high. Basically everything is high apart from motion blur and shadow quality, which, as I said, we had set to off and medium. As I said earlier, VSync is off. Upscaling we've now turned off, so you saw that we were getting a dip in frame rate there, probably about 10 FPS difference between turning it off and turning it on. So turning it on is good, but you might want to tweak the settings a little bit to make it look clear and not fuzzy, because you don't want a fuzzy screen, that's for sure. And then we've got enable VRS, which is on. We haven't actually played with that. So those are our settings that we've been using. Now, I think that we're not quite hitting our 60 FPS that we were hoping for in most areas, but it's such a varied game that the frame rate is going to change depending on where you are. It's not really consistent. Now, I don't know whether that's down to this aging old CPU that we've got in here or the 3070 Ti. I don't know, it could just be the game. Maybe it's just the way the game is optimized. I don't really know. If you want to see more stuff like this, then check out the links in the video description and the links at the end of this video, and you can watch more cool stuff with this old Dell 7010. Really, really fun stuff to play with.